Welcome to Raise and Deploy, a podcast dedicated to international investment with insights from the world's leading investment professionals from New York to Timbuktu. Each episode, we bring on a new guest to discuss the trials and tribulations that occur when seeking substantial returns in foreign markets. We cover the full life cycle of an investment, from the moment you contemplate raising capital offshore to the final check cashed on the return. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Raise and Deploy. I'm your host, Tatiana Berenguer, and today I'm joined by Paul Breloff, a former lawyer and former VC who now runs a staffing company across Asia and Africa. Welcome to the podcast, Paul. It's great to have you.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Yeah, so Paul, from law to VC and now leading Shortlist Professionals, your career journey is quite diverse. What motivated you to transition from law to entrepreneurial world, especially focusing on talent outsourcing in Africa and Asia?
Yeah, it's been quite a journey, and I wouldn't recommend it to everybody to bounce around as much as I have. I think that the through line to all of my work has been trying to find innovative business-based approaches that do something good in the world. For many years of my career, I was oriented much more towards financial inclusion and microfinance, and basically thinking about ways to get life-improving savings, credit, insurance products into the hands of low-income households and small businesses. And then it's obviously evolved. The transition from law was a long time ago, but even then, what was interesting to me was ways that law could be a tool in economic development. So I spent many years in microfinance. I then shifted into investing, specifically in the kind of early days of the fintech revolution, seeing pretty early that there was something changing around 2010, where banks had kind of dominated, and then that gave way to a lot more startup incumbents that were, or startup insurgents that were trying new things, bringing technology to play in ways that old stodgy banks weren't. Set up a venture capital firm to invest in these companies. Invested in about 30 companies around the world. I still am an active angel investor. Love investing and supporting startups. But the problem we kept running into was people. We'd give these companies money, and very quickly their issue would become talent related. And as we looked out into the markets we were investing in, I was doing a lot of investing in Africa, a fair bit in India and other parts of Asia. We noticed there weren't as many reliable partners to help companies navigate the human capital requirements of their business. There's thousands of blogs on how do you raise your seed round and how do you talk to investors, but there's not thousands of blogs or experts guiding you on how do you build your initial executive team? How do you think about culture? What are some tools to streamline your hiring process? So that's kind of led us to Shortlist. We started Shortlist about 8 years ago. We are initially focused on bringing tech tools to market, things like assessments and chatbots to streamline the hiring process. But as we got further into the challenges around African startups and hiring and what was going on, we realized that we needed to be much more hands-on. So today, we're an executive search firm on one hand, one of the bigger firms serving the startup and social impact sectors across Africa. And then we also have a workforce innovation lab that focuses more on entry-level career opportunities for young professionals in Africa. So yeah, it's been quite a journey.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Something I'm intrigued about. So when you think of Africa, Africa is not the obvious location for startups. I want to know, are there opportunities, are good investment opportunities out there in Africa for that segment? Because when I think of Africa, I think of mining, I think of tourism, safari, restaurants. I don't really think of investing in startups. So do tell me about how
Sure.
the African market works that way.
Yeah, you're not the only one to think that. I think Africa, and again, Africa is not one market, of course. It's a lot of separate markets and countries that have some similarities, but some major differences. But you are starting to see the emergence of really interesting startup ecosystems across Africa. Oftentimes, there's kind of the big 3 or 4. Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt get talked about the most, and it's emerging. I do think that I spent many years living and working in India, There are some similarities to the way that India around 2006, 2007 was quite nascent. Not a lot of people would have pegged it as a startup, as a booming startup ecosystem, and it wasn't at that time. It has really evolved very quickly. And it's one of these things where it picks up its own momentum, where a few early success stories breed been there, done that executives who can start new companies, who can set up new investment funds, who then channel more money. And it kind of is a flywheel effect that grows. And today, I consider India one of the most dynamic, interesting ecosystems in the world. We're hoping that Africa and countries within Africa will evolve in a similar way. I think we're certainly, it's earlier in the journey. I think that the kind of tech startup fever probably came to Kenya at least, and other markets in Africa a little bit later. I would say it really started to pick up steam around 2011, 2012. But a lot of these ecosystems are growing. There is a lot of opportunity. I think that investors so far, invested about $4 billion into African startups in 2022. A lot of the sectors that have been successful so far have been within fintech. But the reality is where you have major problems, you have major opportunities. So Africa has so much potential in fields like agriculture. Clean energy is a huge one that we focus a lot on. General climate relevant and climate positive industries. Education for the booming youth population. By 2050, 1 in 2 youth on Earth will be African. I hope I've got that number right. So I do think that this presents a lot of opportunity, but like you said, it's new. So I think right now it's in the stage of a number of firms trying to grow the ecosystem and learn how to adapt. I don't think that the traditional Silicon Valley VC playbook is the right fit for most companies here. I think that what we're figuring out right now in the markets I spend a lot of time in is what is the best growth model, and how does that growth model determine what kinds of different kinds of capital and investors we need to help unlock it. But you're not alone in that initial impression, but I do think there's something really exciting happening on the continent right now.
You mentioned you are an angel investor, and I'm sure you will connect it to other investors. So if, let's say, I have some of my listeners that would be interested in investing in these opportunities, how would they be able to access these opportunities?
I think that there's it's still evolving. There are certainly a large number of funds that are mobilizing capital, mostly from foreign sources. And so there's a lot of VC funds out there. There's also an evolving kind of angel ecosystem, but in many ways, there's probably no substitute for being here. So foreign investors, yeah, you're probably looking at the VC funds that are springing up. But if folks are getting local, I'm really excited to be part of a group that helped start Nairobi Business Angels, which I think has quickly become the leading angel network in Nairobi. We have now into over 100 members of that. And what's exciting to me about the movement at the grassroots of angels is it doesn't have to be, it's not the province of the rich. Most of these investors might be writing checks of just a couple $1,000s sometimes. So obviously you need some money, but that's a much lower barrier to entry than, say, showing up to a Y Combinator demo day and trying to, hustle to write a $200,000 check. So I like that we're democratizing access to angel investing. We're getting more people involved to help build the ecosystem. We're getting more people that want to wrap around their support and help to make sure these companies succeed. So I think this is kind of an exciting approach happening.
Absolutely. I'm intrigued. So do tell me a bit more about how AI is going to impact the workforce. This is something that I'm really excited about, but also worried how the impact is going to be in the next few years, and especially in emerging markets, developing markets like Africa. Are people prepared for that in Africa? Are they looking out for this? What's your perspective on this?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great question. It's a question on everyone's mind right now. And I'd say that no one knows really around the world where we're headed with some of this. There's certainly a lot to be excited about. There's a lot to be afraid of, and everywhere in between. I think AI is going to impact Africa in lots of different ways. And there's going to be certainly opportunities to improve life and services and healthcare and education. And I think it can bring down the costs of higher quality delivery and diagnosis and a bunch of different tutoring. So I think there's a lot to be excited about, particularly in an environment where you have so many. One of the areas I care a lot about is education. you have so many young people entering the workforce. There's more people entering the workforce in the next decade than the rest of the world combined in Africa. And the average age in many countries in Africa is teens, 18, 19, whereas in the US, it's over 40. So what's going to be very important is finding new models of learning, new models of education. And AI can, of course, customize and tailor tutoring packages and learning journeys and whatever in ways that can be really low marginal cost and high impact. So there's a lot to be excited about. I am very fearful about what might happen on the job front. I think globally, it's going to be a mixed bag. I think that there will be some jobs that are wiped out and other opportunities and new jobs that are created. And hard to know what the balance will be. In Africa, I do fear it will be a net job remover. There's been a lot of excitement in the last few years for opportunities for young Africans to plug into the remote digital economy, sit in their country without emigrating anywhere or flying anywhere, but doing work for global companies, which is, of course, a big trend. I think one of the challenges is more and more the jobs that are the most remotable, where you can do it in front of a computer anywhere in the world, are the jobs most exposed to what AI can do, particularly if it's entry level. I think what we've seen is clients who maybe were trying to hire 30 software engineers who, after generative AI came out and Copilot within GitHub, after that came out, they kind of called us back and they're like, actually, we'll just hire 5 people, not 30. So we're seeing an impact. It's causing, as we think about one of our missions and ambitions as a company is to help more people find great careers. As we think about that, we are still very much investing in ways people can plug into remote work within the global digital economy. We're also trying to find more elements of in real life jobs. Hence the reason we're doing a lot of work around climate careers, the growth of clean energy, renewable energy projects, blue economy, regenerative agriculture, e-mobility. So getting back to some of the kind of like in real life, in market economic growth opportunities we see. But yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I got this job through LinkedIn. So they found me on LinkedIn.
Yep.
And I work 100% remotely. Like you said, I'm taking the job, let's say, from an American because I work for a fintech company based in the US. So the job that I'm actually doing could have been done for Americans. So
yep.
If you think of how globalized the market is now, and you're right when you say that AI is going to impact this segment so much because there are things that will still need people to do on the ground.
Yeah.
But there are jobs that can be cheaper to be hired in a different location because of also exchange currency, right? So you're based in Nairobi, right?
Yep.
Yeah, by the way, I really would like to go to Nairobi, but coming back to what we were talking to. So if you think, I don't know how strong the currency in Kenya it is compared to the US dollar, but my point is, how good are these professionals compared to like hiring a person in the US or hiring a person in Africa? How qualified are these professionals? Are they able to deliver the job?
Of course, I think in every market on earth, there's folks of incredible capability and potential and a range of what you're going to encounter. I do think that we're living in a time where every labor market is global. Everyone's compete, not on every job, but on a huge number, as more and more of modern business and industry and getting things done is digital and digitally mediated. It matters less and less where you physically sit, which means that anyone can do a job anywhere, which I think is really exciting. It doesn't solve the global access to opportunity disparities and challenge, but it gives everyone a fighting chance around the world. And I think that African talent, it's hard to generalize, but it's really fantastic. And we're seeing great success with markets like Nigeria, Egypt, Kenya to some extent, South Africa, working and succeeding with global employers. I think it's interesting to watch the way different markets are becoming known for different functions around the world. Different markets are, hubs for being virtual assistants. Others are hubs for software engineering. Others for data labeling and data annotation to fuel AI algorithms. And I think it's still early, but certainly we're excited about Africans, and again, not to generalize, but the ability of African young professionals to work around the world. One of the barriers we're seeing is actually it's access to infrastructure. And so one of the things we work on is trying to make it good internet, but also some of the physical infrastructure. Like many of the jobs that we hire for, we run a program in Kenya to try to help more Kenyans access remote digital work. And that's a lot of data labeling, a fair amount of digital customer service. And the prerequisite for doing these jobs is you have to have your own laptop. You have to have reliable power backup. And so one of the things we're doing under this program is actually distributing and financing at zero interest laptops that meet the specifications of employers. We distribute essentially large batteries like power backups that even if power goes down, you've got continuity. We started to explore other peripherals, laptop monitors, et cetera. So I think we're very excited and bullish about the opportunities for African youth to participate in global opportunities, but there's also barriers that we have to continue working on for sure.
Yeah. And what are you most bullish about?
I think what I'm most excited about that also is the biggest challenge. Give two. One is just the power of this workforce and the potential of this workforce in a context where a lot of countries are facing pretty significant demographic decline. A lot of European nations will be much smaller in 20 years than they are today. Japan has been in decline for a long time. We're starting to see China decline. China is getting a few million people smaller every year. And by 2100, China, which today is, I think, around 1.2 billion, it'll be 600 million people. So the opportunity for Africa and the youth to fill that void, to realize potential, to create more economic opportunity, to help companies get things done, but also bring more of that income back home. Very excited about and happy to be working on that issue. The other is just related to this, is just the potential for Africa to be a leader on the global climate agenda. Africa has, and again, it varies different country to country, but broadly speaking, Africa has three amazing assets. It has one of the most abundant natural renewable energy potential on planet Earth in terms of solar, wind, and geothermal. It has incredible access to natural resources, all the minerals, and you mentioned mining. So much of the world's raw materials come from Africa, but then get put on boats and slowly shipped around the world. What if you could do more of that processing and developing the finished products here? And then the youth workforce. And if you bring those together, I actually think that you can start to see something where more and more of energy is generated through clean, renewable sources. More and more of global manufacturing and production comes here instantly. What has been a major carbon generating activities of like countries doing steel smelting and aluminum smelting using coal energy. Now you can bring it here and do it with green energy. And instantly you take away a lot of carbon emissions. So there's a lot of policy and investment and other things, including the human capital side of this equation, that needs to work for this to come to fruition. This is not a done deal, but when I think about what my hope is and where I'm bullish and where we're as a company spending a lot of effort trying to support, it's really around those areas.
Wonderful. And so I see a lot of similarities between Africa and Brazil, where I'm from. You see great gaps in education in Brazil, a lot of structural problems. So this is something that worries me in the African market, because what happens in Brazil is you have very few people in the top of the ladder that got a really good education. So all of these opportunities ended up getting directed to this, this really small group that went to really good schools. They went to universities that were exposed to other language, so they speak, let's say, English properly. So I feel that Africa is very similar in the sense to Brazil. So what are the challenges you face in your company when it comes to that? Because I'm sure you come across great talent, but these talented people must be really in a competitive environment, because they must be getting a lot of good offers.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think there's a war for top talent. And look, there's pipeline and educational challenges everywhere in the world. Africa's no exception. Kenya's no exception. But I think where Kenya and many African countries are catching up a little bit is just we work a lot in the startup ecosystem. We work a lot with investors and companies that are raising money and then trying to grow at this faster pace because the startup world is so new still in Kenya and many parts of Africa. Like I said, it's about in some ways under 15 years old if you really think about when the momentum started picking up. You don't have this same rich pool of executives who have been there, done that, been through the cycles. It's still nascent, and you have people that are maybe transitioning from more traditional, slower, bureaucratic corporate roles, trying to figure out the speed. That's something, though, that I'm very confident will solve itself as we just develop. In the meantime, the companies that come to us, because we do a lot of executive search, senior leadership hiring, means that we and our clients, we have to get creative. We have to figure out like where might it be a non-obvious transferable hire or transferable skill this person has, and kind of like make the connection between maybe something they have done that's not an obvious fit, but what this job needs. And then it's on companies to be creative in how they set their teams up for success, how they onboard, how they bring people along. I do really very much believe the talent's here, but there's certainly work to be done for companies in attracting that talent, cultivating it to be where they need, coaching people, particularly people coming from contexts that are a bit unusual to the kind of ethos and speed of startup land. So something we get to luckily work on every day.
Fantastic, Paul. Would you like to add anything particular to our discussion? Is there any message you'd like to share with our audience?
No, I think certainly available to be a resource if people are interested in accessing the market, learning more about it. I have invested, made direct investments in probably about a dozen countries around the world, and I do think the different leading markets in Africa present some things that would be familiar to outside investors, but a lot of unique features in terms of how local regulatory plays out, local talent dimensions, market size dimensions, and how to think about market size, which is very different than a lot of the other markets I've worked in. So happy to be happy to think more about that. And from our point of view, you just can't underestimate the role of talent human capital. To some extent, there'd be differences in pockets, but to some extent, there's enough money in the market today. There could always be more. We could do more, but the issue is really the talent, the teams, the readiness to absorb it and do good work with it. So as people are thinking about coming to market, making investments, we'd like to continue being a partner to thinking it through and making sure people are building the best teams for the opportunity.
What would you say is your like differential in Shortlist? Because Shortlist has been a game changer in talent acquisition. What do you do differently from platforms like LinkedIn or your competitors, like your local competitors?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of our biggest focuses is just excellent, high quality, hands-on execution. It sounds silly, but most recruiters in the world, most search firms, everyone has access to LinkedIn, use LinkedIn. We use LinkedIn on a daily basis. But now the differentiators to really creating value for senior leadership hiring is much more the intangibles and the process you can bring to helping a company understand what they actually need, articulating the opportunities in the market, clearly figuring out and informing where the talent's available, putting together search strategies, and then of course the hard work of, not just sending that first note over LinkedIn if that's how you get reached out, but cultivating a senior executive like yourself, figuring out what this person wants, figuring out how it matches or doesn't match with what the company needs, selling the opportunity. So I think it's really been this disciplined approach to following this process. It's been a thoughtful and creative approach to building up a team and training a team at what world-class executive search looks like. So that's on the exec search side. And then the other side, our workforce side, what we call Shortlist Futures, I think it's really been our clear focus on last mile placement frictions. There's a lot of great training organizations out there doing work. There's a lot of great companies looking for talent. There's something that often breaks down in the middle that job boards are not solving, that tech alone are not solving. So I think the fact that we've been able to figure out a model that integrates tech and touch, that integrates all the tools that can automate some of the hiring process, but then apply the hands-on engagement to get people to the results they need, I think that's been really helpful. And it's been a process. We started, like a lot of companies start, hoping that, software is eating the world. Let's go make sure tech solves this problem. We're a little bit more realistic now and aware of tech has its role, but there are some limits when we come to the very human business of recruiting and team building, that we kind of have to make sure tech's doing what tech does best, but that we are balanced and we've got our well-trained, awesome, motivated team doing what they do best as well.
What do you think keeps people interested and engaged in their jobs? Like how to retain talent?
Yeah. I think it's a complicated mix of factors, including perception of growth, compensation, autonomy, sense of freedom, culture. One of the things, there's just many different factors, and we kind of can look at and talk to clients about many of them. I also one of the things we've been thinking about more is just the role of social connections and team, particularly in this weird, remote, distributed context that many of us are doing, working from home. I know that one of the kind of less spoken about bits is, as much as maybe commutes were tough and it's annoying to get dressed for work every day when you can now just sit in front of your computer and do work in your pajamas. I think there was something really powerful about coming to the office, having work friends, going out for drinks, after work, getting to know your teammates as people rather than disembodied heads on a computer screen. So I do think that, there's a range of levers that companies need to think about in retaining, developing, motivating their teams. I think thinking about culture, thinking about presenting clear growth pathways and visions for people's future. Compensation, of course, does matter. But I would urge companies to, particularly the more remote and work from home we get, don't forget about ways to make sure there's actual human level relationships, that there's fun happening in these employment contexts.
Yeah, so one thing we do at Diaglo that I really enjoy is that we play sometimes games with our colleagues. Like we get everybody in the company to engage in a virtual game. That's really bonding. We have a sheet that shows every employee, so get to know your colleague. It's something that really helps. And every now and then they promote people to get to meet each other personally. So we have some tasks that we need to reach out to some of our colleagues that we've never spoken to get to know more people in different segments of the company. So I think for remote companies that are global companies, it's very interesting to see the different kind of environment. I'm very happy in Diaglo with the diversity of the company. We have so many different people, like background, races, nationalities, everything. So it's a very rich, diverse environment to work with, and it's very exciting. It shows what the future is going to look like for everybody.
Absolutely.
Well, Paul, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for your collaboration, for being here with Raise and Deploy. If you like to add anything else, I'm happy to give you some space to talk to. If not, it's been a pleasure to interview you.
No, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much for having me as a guest.
Thank you. I look forward to getting to know each other better. Bye.
Well, there you have it. From AI to angel investing, Paul explains his perspectives on various happenings and changes across different industries and investments. He hikes in on the changing hiring world from entry-level employees all the way through executive search. As he importantly reminds us, human connections in an AI-immersed world is key. People are still making the decisions about who to hire and likely will for many years to come. Thanks for tuning in to Raise and Deploy, the international investing podcast brought to you by Diaglo, the go-to FX platform for international investors. We hope you have enjoyed this episode, and we are looking forward to the next one. If you or anyone you know is experienced in international investing and wants to be our next guest, please reach out at ta@diaglo.com. Thank you.